Hey everyone, welcome to this November community call. My name is Rob, I'm an engineer at Hasura, and I'm here with Rahul, who is a product manager at Hasura, and we are very excited about today, aren't we, Rahul?
Yes, thank you for joining everyone. Preview into Data Delivery Network Alpha and limited access to it as well. So big day for us.
This has surely been coming for a long time. There's been a lot of hard work that's been put in, even in the last, I don't know, couple of hours, we'll say, just making sure that things are polished and ready to go. So we're going to go through kind of an end-to-end experience with V3 today and DDN and look at a few different things. I'm going to start by sharing my screen just because we've got a lot, and I'll go ahead and warn you, we'll probably go over that 1 hour limit like we usually do. But I think you're going to want to stick around for everything that's happening today because we're going to have a lot of announcements and a lot of cool things that we're looking at. So let me just jump into the agenda. We're going to start out with a keynote in just a moment, and you can take one guess at who that keynote speaker will be. We'll bring him up on the stage in just a moment. And then we'll start working through kind of some use cases for DDN and V3, looking at things like subgraphs, Postgres, how to bring in custom business logic using our TypeScript connector, and then also building supergraphs with just native data connectors in general. We'll cap things off with Rahul talking about our roadmap, and we'll kind of look at what's going to be coming down the pipe over the next weeks and months for DDN. If you have any questions throughout this, please, folks, throw them in the question and answer area or the chat, and we'll go from there. But without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and bring the man, the myth, the legend up on stage in just a second.
Awesome. Thank you for joining us today. It's our first preview that you folks can try out of something that's been that we've been working on for the last few months. And so what I'll do is I'll set the stage up with a little bit of an introduction. I'll do a quick demo, and then I'll kind of hand it over to the crew to look at some specific user journeys and some specific workflows that we'd love to show you. So to kind of set context a little bit, over the last few months, if you folks have been tracking what we've been doing with V3 and DDN, we've been talking about a fair number of things, right? We've been talking about kind of immutable builds, so that from a CI/CD point of view, you can have every single change gives you an atomic kind of build, a URL that you can hit. We've been talking about auto scale, edge and multi-region, the idea of being able to have high availability in GitOps from day zero, right? Stuff that we know is a little bit painful to set up with Hasura V2 on that kind of having more kind of complex workflows and complex CI/CD and stuff like that. I think you folks have also seen, if you've been tracking the community calls, the new console visualization, some of the new operational dashboard stuff as well. Now, all of these things are massive, absolutely massive enhancements. But at its core, and that's kind of the theme of the community call today, and what we'd love for you folks to try out as well. At its core, the biggest shift that we've done with DDN, and DDN is what we call kind of our cloud product, V3, which is the engine underneath it, is that developer experience of being able to build a graph and then to build an API that can access that graph, right? So that developer experience and the shift in that developer experience is one of the most kind of critical aspects of our work and what we've been doing over the last few months. This is not just a significant kind of, it's fairly different from the way that we would approach building a graph and building an API in V2, but it's also very different from what you would do in general when you're building an API. And the experience, the correctness that you can get, the speed that you can get, the rigor that you can get in how you build and the API that you get is orders of magnitude higher than what you'd get in building another way, right? And that is kind of central to what we want to do and what we're doing here with DDN. Now, again, if you're familiar with Hasura V1, V2, you kind of go into the console and you remember, and you know that underneath it, Hasura V2 would be backed by a metadata database, right? And when you kind of use the UI to build stuff, it was super quick. It was awesome. And especially when you're learning a new thing, you'll be able to kind of get started with it super quickly, right? And what was happening in the background was that metadata, declarative configuration was getting modified, and it was getting updated inside the metadata database. Now, this flow, while it made it super easy to understand something new and complicated very well, it did make complex CI/CD operations a little bit harder. So today, this experience that we're looking at is at its core a departure from having the requirement of needing a metadata database as a backing store. And that experience has changed in the way that you work with metadata fundamentally, and that has allowed us to create not just an amazing console experience, but also an amazing code-first experience in the way that you'd interact with Hasura. So with that, I'm going to do like a quick 2-minute demo to see what that feels like. And then we'll go into some of the detailed experiences of building with, building with Postgres, building with TypeScript and stuff like that. So let me share my screen and let us dive in. If you look at kind of from a code first point of view, everything you can start with the console to kind of always do that quick start with Hasura. But for all of you, and for most of us who've been using Hasura V1, V2, this is what that experience looks like if we get started with just the CLI and with just VS Code. So I kind of go in here. I have the Hasura CLI installed. Let's go in and initialize a project. So create a new project. This sets up a new project for me. And the metadata is structured slightly differently. And I have a bunch of things set up. I have a new project set up as well. The first thing that we'll do here is we'll go ahead and add a data source. And so I go ahead here, let me run this. And on the docs, there's a sample Postgres URL that you can use as well.
So and hey, Tanmai, the URL, would you take the 2 off of the perfect? Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
There's one typo that we found already. Yeah.
And so this gets added, and now this gets added here. Let's take a look at what that looks like in code. And so when I go in here and open up VS Code, you'll notice that we've done this amazingly creative thing of having a slightly different extension. It's not, you'll have YAML, which is for the YAML files. And then there are things that a Hasura VS Code extension can look at. And these are .html files. And so we call them .html files because they're essentially just YAML, but also because Hasura can, the VS Code extension and Hasura's language server, LSP, which is a big part of the developer experience, it needs that extension so that it can kind of work with these files. So I have that kind of file added here. Let's go up and set up something like a watch. And so what the watch does is just very similar to any other experience of using watch. You can keep kind of working on the metadata. And as you're working with your metadata, we're continuously seeing, and we'll continuously see changes happen live on our project, right? And so I can go in here. So let's go to the console URL that we have here. Right, and I don't have anything on my GraphQL API yet. Let me head to VS Code. You'll see, and this is kind of the experience that we want to kind of build, which is the idea that once you have your directory structure set up and you're starting to scaffold some of these initial files, exactly what you would have done in Hasura V2 in the console, where you would have had seen, this kind of catalog, the introspection, you would have seen existing tables, you would have created new tables, and you would have seen those tables come in. What the VS Code extension will do is it'll kind of prompt you and tell you that there are certain operations that you can run, for example, to track a table and bring that up into your API and transform it and bring that up into your API and stuff like that. So a lot of what we were doing on the console is now kind of happening inside your IDE. I'm starting off with VS Code, but with LSP and stuff, it should work across other IDEs as well. I think a bunch of our folks have it on their backlog to bring that into their favorite IDE. But with VS Code, for example, you'll be able to see kind of how that works and how you're able to bring that to your API. And so let me take a quick example of bringing a user model in here. And so I'll create a user model explicitly. I'll bring in a particular collection here, right? And this is me kind of creating that user model, looking at all of the different fields that I have, the different permissions that I can set up, relationships, all of that kind of goes into this particular file here. And as soon as I hit save, I'll be able to see that come up live here on my GraphQL API, right? And then I can start kind of going around here and playing around with it. This same experience works with V3 and with DDN, and we've kind of brought that to TypeScript as well, right? So for example, I can go ahead and set up a fairly convenient way of starting to write custom code, which is really useful and was one of the big pain points and one of those kind of much needed things when we had with Hasura V1, Hasura V2, right, where that experience required you to set up a separate service altogether. You had to run and host actions separately. And now we've kind of made that a more integrated part of Hasura itself. Again, built on kind of a fairly extensible foundation, right? So I can go in here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a TypeScript connector. And again, I'll just set it up on watch. And as soon as I add kind of the TypeScript connector, we'll see that there's some scaffold function here that we can kind of keep modifying. But as you kind of write these TypeScript functions, the type signature of these TypeScript functions will automatically kind of show up as the right models or commands, in this case, commands, that will then show up in your GraphQL API, right? And so, for example, when I'm working on a hello world kind of function, I'm seeing that there is a procedure called hello that is now available. And if I were to track this procedure, I would see that resolver come up on our GraphQL project as well. And making those changes here live would then impact my GraphQL server live as well. And this is integrated with both local development, and this is available for you when you're going to be doing, when you're deploying this as well. And this allows the entire developer experience of when you're building that graph out or you're adding custom resolvers to the graph to happen entirely via code if you so desire. And of course, there's on the console significant enhancements around kind of being able to visualize that graph and understand what is happening in that graph that we'll see in a bit. As we look at the rest of the demos today, I'm not going to take too much more time because we have a whole bunch of things to go ahead with. But as you look at the demos today and start playing around with Hasura with DDN, a few of the things that we'd love to work with folks who are trying out the alpha is especially on kind of this developer experience and working on that over the coming weeks. There are a few critical building blocks. You'll notice there are contextual code actions, which is what allows VS Code to show you the right actions to do at the right time. There's semantic autocomplete. So when you're looking at relationships or permissions, your VS Code is going to kind of give you this autocomplete experience that is similar to the form kind of experience that you had on the console. So you're going to get kind of correct autocomplete, the right relationships. You're going to choose a model, and you're going to get the right fields and autocomplete for that particular model that you're building a relationship with and stuff like that. And then, of course, there's feedback that you're getting from the build system and from the compiler that is continuously telling you whether your metadata is correct or whether your metadata is incorrect, and eventually whether you made a change that your API is going to break or your API is not going to break and stuff like that. And so on those kind of building blocks of developer experience, we'd love kind of, as you try it out, we'd love your feedback there. And as we gear up towards a production release in January, hammering that out and tightening that up is the highest priority for us. We'll share a link to our Discord if you don't have it already. There's a DDN launch channel that we'll be discussing on. The product and the engineering team will be hanging out there over the coming weeks. And as you start stress testing Hasura, we'd love to kind of keep interacting with you there. A quick note on, because it's come up a bunch of times on folks thinking about open source and how open source works with V3 and DDN. Hasura DDN, we call it the Data Delivery Network. It's kind of like a Cloudflare, but for data, is the way to think about it. And that shows up in a variety of ways. It means that, for example, pricing is not dependent on usage, on infrastructure usage at all. Pricing is just dependent on the number of models you have, because there's a lot of the infrastructure work that we've done to make sure that it doesn't matter what scale you use it at. But that DDN product is built on top of our V3 engine. The bits of Hasura V3 and DDN that are open source are more than what we had in V2. So the entire data plane, V3 engine, all of our connectors, the Postgres connector and the various connectors, even to commercial databases, connected to different connectors to different programming languages. We have a TypeScript connector, we'll have connectors to different programming languages. Eventually, all of these connectors are all open source as well. The LSP, the language server, that is going to help you do the autocomplete and talk to Hasura, that is also open source, so that you can kind of interact with that system. The control plane, which is the system that generates those build URLs and automatically deploys them for you and scales them for you and stuff like that. That is the portion that is cloud hosted and maintained by us. So that is closed source. But the rest of Hasura is on the data plane side is entirely open source, which means that if you want to self-host, for example, you'll easily be able to take back metadata. Say you're using the console, you're using VS Code, whatever you're doing, you can try it out, get your metadata right, and then you can even self-host it if you wanted to, or run it in a non-cloud environment, not run by Hasura Cloud if you needed to. We'll get into more details. We haven't open sourced some of these repositories yet. Some of the connectors are open source, but we're adding contributing guides to all of those repositories, and we'll share that across in pretty soon, and so that you'll have access to, and we'll be able to join us in looking at the code base and contributing there, and kind of continuing our engagement on GitHub. With that, I'm going to hand it over to the rest of the team. I've taken far more than my time, but we'll get into more of the details with what you can do with Postgres, with TypeScript, and with multiple databases at the same time, and what that experience looks like.
So we're going to see a lot of cool things here in just a moment. And Tanmai, I'm going to kick you off stage in just a moment, but I'm going to say one thing. I'm going to make a bet real quick, because this morning was my first time that I got to see Watch in action. And I feel like maybe, I don't know, 6 months, a year from now, we're going to go, how did we build APIs before this? And obviously I'm biased, but you know, that's how I'm feeling after this developer experience. It's pretty awesome.
Thanks.
Good. So first we're going to bring up Rishi, who's going to talk to us about subgraphs and Postgres. So we'll look at some of the same workflow that we saw from Tanmai, but we'll go into a bit more detail. And really that's what you can expect for the rest of this call, right? We're going to be going through different use cases, different examples of different parts of the stack itself, and how we can implement them. So I'll bring Rishi on just for a second to introduce himself, talk a little bit about what's going to be happening. And then because we are always a little hesitant of live demos, Rishi's recorded his, so we'll have him hit play in just a moment. But Rishi, welcome, how are you?
Good. How's it going?
Great. Do you want to give us a little intro and tell us what we're going to see in this video?
Yes. So as Tanmai was talking about Hasura DDN enabling Supergraph, building a Supergraph of your data domain. So I just tried to build an e-commerce application, and I try to expose the read APIs of my Postgres database. I build it using the DX tooling that we built for Hasura DDN. Yeah, that's about it. Hey, hello people. My name is Rishi, and I am an engineer in the Hasura DDN team. Today, my demo will be about building a supergraph with Hasura DDN. A supergraph, as you might know, is a GraphQL API that federates data and API over different data domains, which we call subgraphs. Right? So I'm trying to build an e-commerce application, and one of my subgraphs is the app database. I'll quickly show you what that is. So I have this Postgres database, and it has these tables. This is my e-commerce data model. And I want to expose read APIs over this database, and that's going to be my subgraph, right? As my e-commerce application evolves, I might need more subgraphs, like say billing and invoicing could be one, a data warehouse or a data lake could be another, right? So let's get started quickly. I'll go to docs, and I will have to install the new Hasura CLI, which we call Hasura 3. the Hasura VS Code extension, because most of the development we'll do in VS Code, and a Postgres database, which I already have. I have these installed, so I won't do it. But if you want to try it out, please install these assets, right? So I'm gonna start with Hasura login. Hasura Cloud. I'll log in with Hasura Cloud Personal Access Token. Then I'll create a project, Hasura 3 init. I'll put it in the e-commerce directory locally, right? We create a new project. So a new Hasura DDN project called Select Whale 2376 have been created. Let's in the e-commerce directory. The assets are put in the e-commerce directory. We'll author the metadata there and then apply to the DDN project, right? So let's open this in VS Code. So a bunch of things have been created. Let's go to Hasura.yaml. This is the entry point to the Hasura project. It has the project name, Hasura DDN project name, and build profile, right? So what is a build profile? A build profile is a file that contains the spec of how to build the metadata in this folder, right? So if you see, it has Supergraph resources and subgraph resources. Supergraph resources contains resources that are common to the entire supergraph, while subgraph resources are independent resources for each subgraph. So a subgraph called default was automatically created, and this is what I'm going to work in right now, right? Going to supergraph resources, there's an auth config here. There's firstly a compatibility config, which is the version of this metadata structure, and then there's auth config, which contains the auth configuration of your supergraph, right? There is a sample webhook, which is managed by Hasura DDN. This has been put in here so that you can play around and get started with your supergraph, but eventually you'd like to integrate it with your own auth provider, right? And now in subgraphs, in default, I have commands, data connectors, and models. Naturally, it's empty because we haven't done anything. So let's add a data connector now, right? I'm going to call it app.html. HTML is Hasura metadata language. It is a language that we author metadata in, and the VS Code extension, which is also identifying this as a Hasura HTML file, will help us author this metadata in an awesome way, right? So let's get started. I hit control space here. There are a bunch of objects that I can add, but I'm going to add Hasura Hub Data Connector. Hasura Hub Data Connector is a data connector managed and maintained by Hasura. So you can just give your database connection parameters to Hasura Hub Data Connector and just instantly bring in that database in your supergraph, right? So I'll call this app. Connector ID is Postgres because it is a Postgres database. Region configuration, I'll add GCP US West 2 because my database is located in US West 4. So it's the closest region, right? Mode is read only because I only want to expose read APIs, version 1, and connection URI. Ideally, if you are ideally in production, in serious applications, you'd like to enter database URL from a secret value because database URL is sensitive. But for the sake of this demo, I'll just use it in plain text directly. It's not recommended. Just letting you know. So now I have brought in the partial configuration of my Hasura Hub Data Connector, and then I will run a VS Code command by hitting Control-Shift-P or Command-Shift-P, and I'll just say refresh data connector. I choose my database, and you see it's refreshing the data connector. It introspects the underlying database and brings in the metadata in the Hasura metadata. So if you see, new metadata has been brought in. There are tables, cart items, there are columns, table cards, the columns, the type of the columns, and things like that, right? So I'll fold this, and now I'll start bringing in tables of this database into my metadata as models, which will be exposed in my GraphQL API, right? So I'll go to the models directory and create a new file called products.html, right? And here I'll run a command, again, Control-Shift-P or Command-Shift-P, and I'll just say track collection from data connector. You see all the tables in my database are suggested. I'm only going to bring in products, and you see products, the table products has been brought in as a model in my metadata, and then this model has type called products, which also got auto-defined. And this product has fields which map onto the columns of the underlying project table, which is category ID, country of origin. And then whatever scalar types were required, they were also brought in and defined here. So it is completely declarative, right? If I want, I can change the name of the scalar, and that's the name of the scalar that will get reflected in my GraphQL API, right? So similarly, I'll bring in I'll bring in the orders table as an orders model. Again, I hit Control-Shift-P and track collection, orders, and again, the model orders has been brought in. There are a couple more objects like model permissions, type permissions. We'll come to that in a bit. Okay. Now that I've done this, I'll go to my terminal and run Hasura 3 build creator. So this will create a build. Firstly, what is a build, right? A build is an immutable compilation of your metadata. You can look at the build, you can query it, like you can preview what the metadata will compile to, and you can make GraphQL APIs to the build independently, right? You can create any number of builds, and finally, when a build is good to go, you can apply it to the to your project URL, and that URL can be queried by your clients and different APIs, right? So let's quickly go to the console and explore this build that we just created. You see, there is orders and products models that we just exposed, and we can now start querying them. ID, status, create that, and I can run this query. It will give me all orders. There are many, so now I'll also add a limit, say 4, and I can add filters, say where status equals complete, right? And I make this query, and yes, here we go. Right. Similarly, I can also add the products node, and yeah, can also query products, right? So can go to the Explorer and visualize our subgraph. Currently, there is only one data connector called app and only 2 models which are not connected through relationships, right? So I will go and now add relationships, right? So firstly, I go to the orders.html and say track suggested relationship. So I'll create a relationship. It is suggesting a relationship from orders to products based on the product ID foreign key. I'll track that. Go down, a relationship has been added. Source is orders, target is products. It's an object relationship, and the mapping of columns is also defined, right? Similarly, I'll add a relationship from product to orders, a reverse relationship with that foreign key, and that also got added from products to orders. Relationship type is array, and this mapping, right? I'll also bring in a users model. I'll hit Control-Shift-P, track collection, users, and yeah, user model has been brought in. I'll also track suggested relationship from users to orders, right? From orders to users, not really, I don't want to bring it right now, so I'll keep it that way. And now I'll go and create another build. Right, another build got created. The previous build is there as is, you can still query it, right? But this is another separate independent build that got created. Let's try to query it, right? So if you see, users has also been brought in, and now I can make queries. So say something like I want to query orders along with the product that was ordered, right? So your ID and name has been product ID and product name is also coming in with the orders table. So we can query over relationships, right? We can also make like fancy queries like users, ID, name, then orders. We are querying all products that users ordered, right? So ID, image, name, and here we go. So Sean had queried sticker sheet, Rob had queried Hasura's in the cloud T, and so on, right? If we go and visualize this, I go to my subgraph. There's one subgraph default, which has a data connector app, and this has 3 models interrelated in this way, right? One-way relationship from users to orders, 2-way relationships between orders and products, and things like that, right? So going back to graphical, I make this query. and I get all the users. All right. Now, this is a pretty good query. This is the kind of query. Just give me a second. Yeah, sorry. So let's go, and so this is a query which gives users and the products they ordered. But there's a problem with this query that this query returns data for all users, and this is not something I'd like in my application, right? In my application, I'd like to make a query where users can only see their own data and their own orders, but you'd like users to see all the products. So Hasura has permissions which can help us achieve exactly this. So let's go and configure the permissions, right? So firstly, on the users model, right? If I look for model permissions, you see there is a permission for role admin, which has no filters. So it's giving, we've been making queries as admin, that's the default role. You can change the default role, the same. But currently, we've been making queries as admin, but now we will also add permissions for role user. And for filter, we'll say field comparison, field ID equals value from session variable x Hasura user ID. Right. What this will do is whenever a query comes to Hasura and Hasura resolves this query from the session. So how it does is it queries this webhook. Since we have configured a webhook, Hasura would get the session of that query. That could be a token or cookie or anything, and resolve that session into session variables, which could be x Hasura role, x Hasura user ID, x Hasura email, and you could have any number of session variables, right? So what Hasura would do now is Hasura would look at the x Hasura user ID and only allow data which has ID equal to x Hasura user ID in the users table, right? In the users model. Similarly, there is type permission, which allows us to restrict what all fields users the roles can query, right? So for admin, all fields are allowed, but for role user, I only want to allow ID, email, and creative. And that's what I'm going to do, right? And similarly for orders, I want to have model permission such that for role user, field comparison where field user ID equals value from session variable x Hasura user ID, right? And in type permissions, let's see. For role user, I want created at, sure, delivery date, sure, ID, okay, is reviewed is something I don't want, right? And finally, for products, I don't want to have any restrictions, so I'll just replicate the permissions for role admin and role user. Right? And yeah, we have set permissions now. Let's quickly create a build. Hasura build create. Hasura 3 build create. Right? And now if I go to the build, by the way, you can also view your previous builds here and query them. They are always there. Right? So now if I go here and I'll make that query again, all users are returned because I'm still making the query as admin. Now I'll try to emulate this query as role user. Let me pick up the x user ID of Sean, and let me x Hasura role is user, and x Hasura user ID is this user ID, right? And now instantly it's showing me errors that this name field doesn't exist on users type because we hadn't allowed the name field in the type permissions, right? Same for is reviewed, right? So I'll remove this and now I'll make the query and I'll only see query data for Sean, right? Similarly, if I query the orders table, ID, say status, and I'll only see orders that Sham had made. So we have added an authorization layer on our API, and we are pretty much good to go, right? If I just replace this with my auth provider, this API is quite ready to be exposed to my users, right? So if I go visualize, it's still the same because we didn't add any new items, but you can see some permissions here, right? There are permission on products, everything is allowed. On orders, the user role has partial permissions, same for users, right? So now similarly, I like this API. Now I'll bring in rest of my models in, right? I'll say other models dot example. Ideally, you would like to have a models metadata in its own separate file, like we did for orders, products, and users. But just for the sake of this demo, I'm putting in everything here. So I'll just say track all collections from this app in this file, and I'll go create a build, and let's go check it out. So now again, we added more models, but they're not showing up here because the query is being emulated as role user, and we have not added permission for those new models for role user. So they are not exposed, right? But now if I remove this, now the query is being made as admin and all the models are exposed. So we can query all these models as admin. And if we want to expose them to users, we can just add permissions like we added for users and orders models, right? If I go and before I go and visualize that, I will also apply a build to, like now that I have exposed things, I have added authorization to some models. I'll apply this build to my project URL. So far, we've been querying the build URL. This has the build version, the project name -build version. But now if I go to the project URL, which is project name.dtn.hasura.app, I can see the same API because I had just applied it. If I go to access, if I make query as access role user, the permissions are still valid. So the build, the last build got applied to the project URL. And yeah, this can be exposed to my front-end application because this URL will always be constant, right? We'll quickly try to visualize this. Yeah, now you see we have a beautiful visualization of my subgraph. I'll go full screen and you can visualize it however you want. I'll set it to 3D first diagram, and yeah, and I can visualize it. I can create architectural diagrams. I can use this in my presentations and things like that. So yeah, we have created a subgraph. Let me know if you have any questions. Yeah, thank you so much.
Appreciate that. Was awesome. So we spent a lot of time there talking about the concept of a subgraph, and I think that from what we saw in that video, right, it should be pretty familiar for V2 users coming over to V3 in terms of setting permissions, using headers, those kinds of things. But obviously, right, we're looking forward to the next step, which is going to be this concept of a supergraph. So if I were a developer and I just finished doing that subgraph that you had created, what would my next steps be as an engineer?
Yeah, exactly what we did right now, right? So we expose the Postgres database and we expose the APIs in a single subgraph. But now if you have a completely separate data domain, like say invoice or data lake, right? You could just create another subgraph on DDN and you can create relationships from one subgraph to the other. And this whole thing gets federated as a supergraph, which can be queried by your clients. So yeah, this was a sneak peek into building one subgraph. You can have multiple subgraphs owned, managed, developed, and deployed by independent teams with the reliability that you won't break anybody else's development or anybody else's subgraph, right? So yeah,
awesome.
that's what we're looking at.
Very good. Lather, rinse, repeat. Keep going. Yeah. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Have a great one.
All right, folks. Next up, we're going to look at building a to-do app with Hasura DDN. And we have a recorded demo from Suraj, who I believe is on the call and can answer questions if folks have any. We're going to be looking particularly at the TypeScript connector here, which is our way of incorporating custom business logic into your API. I got to play with this a couple of days ago and had a lot of fun bringing Stripe into that same schema that Rishi just had, and it's really unlocking some powerful things in my mind. So without further ado, let's go ahead and have Suraj's video.
Hey folks, today I'm going to give you a demo on how you can build a to-do app with business logic on Hasura V3. My name is Suraj and I'm a senior engineer at Hasura. So what is in this demo? I'm going to show you, I want to focus a little bit more on the things you were not able to do with V2. Things like how you can code TypeScript on Hasura, and then how you can deploy those functions to Hasura Cloud, and how you can introduce business logic stuff like data transformation, input validations, API integrations, and so on. All right, time to code. So I'll go to the VS Code, and I have a project setup which is similar to what Rishi has just created. But the tables that I created are slightly different because we are building a to-do app. And for that, I have two tables. One is users, and that we have to-dos as another table. And I have everything running on my local machine. All right. Now let's start with how you can create writing a functions on Hasura. For that, what we have to do is we have to create a functions folder, and then I'm going to create a file called index.ts. And to point to this function, I also need to create a config.json file, which is having some important configurations. As you can see, functions is defined here, and then we have some additional configurations. Now, let's go ahead and create a small functions here, as basic as possible. I'm going to call this hello world, export function, hello world. And then I'm going to create a function definition. I'm simply going to return a text called hello world. All right. Now let's go ahead and execute or run this function on the local machine. And for that, I'm using the dino run command because it's a dino function where we are running all these things. And it is also added with the Hasura TypeScript connector SDK so that it makes sure that these functions are exposed and introspected in the form which Hasura can understand. So keep in mind that I have not created any types, but the Hasura connector will be able to introspect and generate the schema for me. All these things are internal so that we don't have to worry about how it is being done. All right, now we have the server running on 8100 port. I'll just copy that for creating a data connector. So as you know that in Hasura V3, everything is a data connector. So I'm going to create a data connector called functions. I'm going to create a file called functions.html under the data connector directory. And then I'm going to create a kind data connector, and then I'm going to do the control space to get the suggestions, and I'm going to call this functions. Again, I need some configurations to set up this. For that, I'm leveraging the auto completion, but I just need a single URL because I don't have a read and write configuration for the specific different configuration for this. I'm simply going to paste this URL. All right, and here the magic comes in. So keep in mind that I have installed Hasura extension for this, and then I'm going to do Hasura refresh data connector, and Hasura will ask me like which data connector we want to introspect. All right, here we go. We have the schema automatically populated in this file. Now let's go ahead and create commands for the same. I'm going to create functions.html. And then what I want to do is I want to create or I want to track those commands. And for that, either I can say, hey, track the procedures from data connector. Otherwise, I can say, hey, track everything from that data connector. So I'm going to go with the second option so that it's a single command. I'm going to select the data connector here. All right, we are all set to create our first data connector. And if you think from the infrastructure point of view, here we have a small problem because I have my server running on my local machine, but I want the developer experience to be on Hasura Cloud, right? And for that, how will I bring this to Hasura Cloud, right? I'm going to do a secure tunnel way of handling this. We'll be sharing more details on the secure connect soon, but for the context, right now I have a tunnel running, a TCP tunnel running with the Hasura CLI. You just have to do Hasura daemon start and then Hasura tunnel create the localhost 8100. And I have a similar setup running here. I'll just show you the tunnel running on my local in real quick. And as soon as you create a tunnel, you get a tunnel endpoint like this. This tunnel endpoint can be used to point your data connector endpoints or maybe even Postgres connection endpoint here. All right. So now we are all set to create our first build. I'm going to create a build and I would like to call this hello world. I've added the description so that I can identify the build real quick. All right, I got the build created. By the way, I have installed Hasura CLI for this. All right, I'm going to click on this console URL and see how my build is created. All right, so I have my mutation available on this left section. And if you want to create a query, you can also see that the Postgres thing that we added is also available here. And for this demo, for now, I'll just query the hello world that we just created. Awesome. We have the data coming from the local machine to Hasura Cloud, and I have my API resolved here. Let's see if it is really getting my changes. To show that, I'll say hello world from Suraj. All right, I'm going to save this and I'm going to look at how Dino is detecting the changes and immediately acting upon, and then making sure that the new procedure is updated. Now let's query this again. Awesome, I got the latest update here. So this is how the developer experience of bringing the business logic to Hasura looks like. Now let's fast forward a little bit and see how we can implement a little complex things. I'm going to copy the function which I created here. Okay, to save some time, I'll just put everything in place. So I have updated my index.ts file with two functions. One is insert to dos and update to dos. And I also have some custom logic. I'll just remove this first and then show you the first one. All right. Yeah, if you notice this function here, I have a input validation logic and I have input sanitization logic, and then I'm executing these SQL queries on the Postgres database. So as we have a TypeScript runtime to play around, we have all the new things that we can implement. So anything you can write in TypeScript, you can write it. You can get it working on Hasura now. All right. So I have done the same thing. Like I've created my data connector here, and then I also have my commands tracked here. If you want to show, if I want to quickly see how it has happened, I'm going to do this again. Tag all procedures, functions, and everything for me. It automatically generated. I did the data. You can also do the refresh database stuff here. But yeah, to save some time, I'm doing it a little faster. Now let's create another build. I'm going to call this ToDo app. Again, using the Hasura CLI for that. Hasura build create That's all you need, and you can also pass a description optionally. I'm also going to open the new console URL. Actually, you can do the same thing by selecting the list of builds here. Yeah, in this demo, as you can see, the hello world is gone because I removed that function. And now I have a to-do app, insert to-do mutation, and then I'm going to get the ID to-do and user ID here. Let's say I want to book tickets, and the user ID corresponding to that is 1 for this demo. All right, let's see how it works. All right, so basically it has included, added the to-do onto the database. Let's go verify that here. To-do and probably the ID. I can see the same data is being added here. And now let's take a look into how we can introduce the business logic here. So for example, I have added two conditions here. One is the to-do has to be a valid text with more characters, and the second one is the to-do should not contain any bad words. And for that purpose, I have added an npm. I have used an npm module here. So just like this, you can also include the npm modules or maybe Dino modules, and then get your TypeScript function up and running. Let's see how it is working in action. I'm trying to create a to-do without any valid to-do text. I got an error as expected. Maybe let's try to create a to-do with a bad word. I probably type a little, maybe I'll say, what is the meaning of hell? Hell is considered as a bad word, so just for the demo I'll be using that. All right, we got an error, but maybe I'll just say what is the meaning of good, so it should work. Here we go, we got the latest data. We'll query the same from the database, we got the same. All right, so we have seen how the input validation works here, or how we can introduce. It's mostly the TypeScript thing at the moment, but soon we'll be adding more support to different sort of programming languages, so that if you are a Go developer, you can program in Go. If you are a Java developer, you can do the same. And on the data transformation side, I have also included something like a special character filter, so that if I pass something like a special character here, and then if I try to execute, the special character is filtered out, and then I got the data inserted in the clean way. And now let's see how we can introduce a API integration, and for that I'm using a Slack notification soon after the data is being inserted. Let's let's probably add this at the end of the execution, and then I have to create a new build because everything, the input, output types, and everything remains the same. Let's see. Get me a Slack notification. I'm executing this. All right, this was executed, and I have a test Slack instance. Awesome, we got the the message delivered onto my Slack instantly. All right, now let's do a quick recap on what we have done here. So basically, for the development environment, I have a Hasura Cloud account, and then I have a Hasura. I have a Postgres database running on my local machine, and then I have TypeScript functions running on my local machine. So the Dino instance is running on 8100, and the Hasura TCP secure connect is allowing Hasura Cloud to communicate between the local port, local host 8100, and getting the data back, or fetching, allowing Hasura Cloud to fetch the data from this function. And I am also communicating the external APIs from this TypeScript runtime, and I'm communicating with the local Postgres database. This will significantly help the function development to Hasura Cloud in a faster way, because you're not changing anything on, or you're not redeploying everything onto Hasura Cloud. And once you're done with the local development environment, then you can deploy those functions to Hasura Cloud, and the Hasura Cloud can execute the functions and get the data of the function or procedure resolved in a faster way. You can also make these functions. You can get these functions as mutation or query just by adding the comments as pure. All right. So to save some time, I'll share this repository with all of you so that you can get to know how you can configure a procedure or functions. But yeah, that's for now. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned for more updates.
Helps to unmute yourself. That was excellent. Like I promised, we are going to be running over time today just a bit. We have one more demo that we're going to look through, which is going to be using a concept that we call native data connectors. So if you were to go to hasura.io/connectors right now, you would see a gallery of all the different options that we have and that are in the pipeline coming soon. And then also information about the SDKs for building your own connectors. But we're going to look at one for SendGrid. I think this video is probably just under 10 minutes, and then Rahul is going to pick things up at the very end and talk about the roadmap and what next steps are for DDN and what's coming over the next weeks and months. So we'll go ahead and hop into this little last demo.
Hello everyone, my name is Brandon. I'm a Director of Engineering here at Hasura, and today I want to show you how to incrementally build a supergraph using native data connectors and the Data Connector Hub. So let's get started. All right, so the first thing I want to do is I have a project here that I've already created in the console. And so as you can see, we don't have anything here in the graphical yet, because if we go to the Explorer and look at our supergraph, we don't have anything connected. We do have one subgraph default, but there's no data sources connected to that right now. So let's go ahead and connect a data source to that. And so what I have right now in my application is I have some Chinook data, and I want to initiate a project here from an existing project, and that was Glad Caribou. Yes, that's correct. Okay, and so as you can see, we've got our files here. Let's go ahead and add our first connector. It is a Aurora Postgres instance. Okay, so now let's see. Okay, so we've saved this. Let's refresh the data source. Okay, bring that in, and then let's add our first model. And for the purpose of this, I want to add the customer model. And let's track a collection for that. And then from here, let's do a new build. And let's refresh. Okay, and as you can see, we've started adding to our supergraph. So our first subgraph here, default, has an Aurora instance that has a customer table. And so the next thing that I would like to do is, let's see, when a customer orders something, albums or tracks or anything, what would be great is in my application if I could send them an email. So let's see, Explorer, let's go in here, let's see, what do we have available for data sources? So here what we have is how you can connect different data sources. So on this screen, these are some, Postgres is available now, a couple of the coming soon ones. But what I really want to highlight here is that we have this connector hub. And the point of the connector hub is we're going to be putting a lot of different connectors here, but also the community connectors that you all build can also be submitted to the connector hub so they can be available here. And so, as I said, I would love to send an email or send a customer an email when they do an order, and just so happens that we have a SendGrid connector here. So what I'm going to do is go out and look here. And okay, so here's directions on how you can set this connector up. All right, so let's go ahead and get this connector set up here. So we're going to use the Hasura CLI. We're going to connector create. And I'm going to pass it the branch that I want to use and the config file. Go ahead and check the status here. And okay, we've got a URL that we can use. So what I want to do now is create a new subgraph. Now that we have our new subgraph, let's go ahead and add SendGrid in here under that subgraph folder. Let's refresh this data source. So let's go add a new command file, call it sendmail. Let's track that sendmail procedure, and let's create a new build. All right, let's go to the console and see what we have. Do a refresh since we created a new build. And look at that, our subgraph has grown. Now we still have our default with Aurora and our customer table, and now we have a SendGrid with a SendGrid and a SendMail. And we should have access to that in a mutation here. Yep, looks like we do. Great. So the next thing that I would like to do real quick here at the end is I also, as part of my application, I have a separate ClickHouse instance that I store all of the customers' total purchased in as an aggregate. And so what I would like to do, because I'm pretty sure I saw here, let's go back and look. Yep, we do have a ClickHouse. So I want to go ahead and set up this ClickHouse connector. So if I go out to this one and also follow through the README here, I can go ahead and go back to my console and Hasura 3. Let's check the status on our ClickHouse connector here. Okay, we've got a URL, so our connector's up and running. So let's create a new subgraph. Next, let's add our ClickHouse connector here. Refresh the data source. And then in this case, I know I have a model, so I'm gonna extract the collection in here. Create a new build. Let's go back and check our console. Do a refresh. And we've got 3 separate subgraphs now on our supergraph. So I hope you found that really useful on how you can incrementally build a supergraph using subgraphs. We're really excited about the Data Connector Hub, and I look forward to talking to you in the chat, and please ask questions if you have them.
That was awesome from Brandon. And I think that it does a good job of illustrating kind of this idea that we have of, composing things bit by bit or iteratively as it goes. So these different pieces of subgraph that can be kind of modularized and put together to make your supergraph. And we're really looking forward to the connector hub and how it's going to take off with all these different native data connectors. But we've talked a lot and we are on to the very end right now. So we're going to go ahead and look at the roadmap for DDN. So I'll turn it over to Rahul. And Rahul, I can tell, I think you're at reInvent right now. So if you'd like me to, I'm happy to click through the slides and you just tell me when to go.
For sure, there's only one slide.
Okay.
So you can go to the next one. And thank you everyone for still sticking around at the top of the hour. And we really enjoy all the excitement you're sharing with us. And we internally are also excited with this new rollout. And as you can see on the roadmap going forward, the entire focus is on improving the developer experience. We have rolling out these significant changes across form factors from IDE to console to CLI to metadata changes. And we realize that there will be still a lot things to improve. As you go through, we really encourage you to try DDN Alpha out. We'll send you the invite right after this call. That's the documentation page there for you to get started. And that's the Discord channel for you to engage. Product and engineering folks of Hasura will be hanging out there. Any questions? But what we really need your help and the partnership is to help us get the DX in the right place. So some of the things which our team will be, as I mentioned, razor focused on in the weeks to come would be to help improve the DX on these 4 different categories. So try the product out, let us know, keep us honest wherever you feel any things can be improved, especially on the author metadata easily part where, as Tanmai mentioned, we are coming out with more LSP enhancements around code generation, autocomplete, things like that. Also debugging and resolving metadata, like you have metadata in different files and now you're actually editing metadata on declaratively. How do you quickly debug and resolve errors when they come? Permission building was asked in part of the chat here. So permission building, adding relationships, changing case, things like that, quick iteration on different files. And lastly, enhancements to the CLI watch, which Tanmai provided. So all of that would be as part of this whole metadata authoring bucket, which we really need some feedback on to make us the best developer experience possible. And then avoiding API breaking changes. For example, you see almost every demo had a build create command in it. What if you run into errors at that point? Giving you a dry run mode, giving you compile time guarantees, giving you improved error handling at that point so that you can go to production confidently. And once you go to production confidently, we'll bring up with an operational health dashboard for easy troubleshooting and monitoring, kind of an advanced monitoring tab of what you see in V2. And lastly, you saw that whole TypeScript business logic piece by Suraj. We're just going to ramp that up a notch with things like more tutorials and making the experience even better. We're going to focus on TypeScript for a few weeks and month to make sure that the TypeScript experience is best. You're able to use most of the NPM ecosystem out there natively and build connectors, bring business logic, bring all types of APIs, including REST and GraphQL. And then we'll move into other programming languages out there. Thank you for sharing feedback. Good to see C# there on the board. I was thinking Kotlin, but maybe we need to do C# first. But then, and lastly, team collaboration. One question came around team collaboration as well. So the brilliant thing with B3 is that you don't need to create multiple projects for multiple team members. There's a whole multi-repo workflow with one project in building a supergraph. That was what Brandon's demo was all about. So we're going to make that even better so that you can have one project and use subgraph namespaces and environments to effectively collaborate between teams. So these are our focus areas. Let us know as you try the product out, how can we improve on these? And if you have feedback apart from these buckets as well, please just let us know. You can engage with us on the Discord channel, email us. If you have a phone number, call us, whatever works best for you. But thank you again for being part of our community and trying DDN Alpha out.
Yeah, thanks so much, folks. As always, the way we end things, right? We're always looking for feedback, as Rahul has just said, and there's lots of ways of reaching out to us. I believe as well, Rahul, am I correct about saying that the GraphQL engine repo, you can raise an issue there as well, even if it's related to V3, and we'll take a look at it there?
I would say Discord is the best way for DDN right now. Once we go, we open source a repo for V3 engine. We are working on GitHub based kind of feedback loops, but right now Discord Alpha is a good place to, DDN Alpha group on Discord is a good place to go. Perfect.
All right. We'll see you folks on the next one. And, we usually don't have one in December. So if everyone has a great holiday season coming up, then, yeah, I guess for the next community call, we'll see you in the new year. Thanks, folks.